What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and I critically analyze apologist claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Last time on this particular pastor's rant, we discussed the harsher portions of the Old Testament. The pastor defended God by saying that God was doing it for good reasons. Well, today is a segment from probably around the middle of his whole spiel. And basically, he's going to tell us that we're really stealing our morality from God. Oh, also, all atheists already know God exists. We're just suppressing knowledge of it. So if you want to fuck around and find out how you're suppressing the knowledge of God and stealing his morality in the process, then please stay tuned.
Because God is a just God. Anytime an atheist says that something is right or wrong, do you realize, because they don't, that they're actually and literally stealing the concept of morality from the God of the Bible? Because outside of the God of the Bible, there is no law, there is no morality. That morality comes from the God of Abraham. So anytime they say that's wrong or that's right, they're really acknowledging the God of the Bible without even knowing it.
Wait a second, fucking what? Wait, atheists, so that's what he was saying, is that atheists are stealing morality from the Bible? No, that's not how that works. Even without a God, people in other cultures without this concept of Yahweh or Christianity or anything like that, they can determine right and wrong because we have complex central nervous systems, and those kind of decision-making abilities are emergent properties of complex central nervous systems. I mean, you see that in some complex organisms today, like dogs, cats. Cats always kind of choose to be little assholes on occasion. Not all cats are assholes, but you know, a majority of them. But dolphins also exhibit some of these properties. So, I mean, the ability to choose or to make determinations, like moral determinations, is just something that complex central nervous systems can do. So it's definitely not stealing from the Bible. But again, I want to point out some of this morality that this guy claims God to have. And this is apparently the morality that we're stealing from. Okay, here's Numbers 31:17-18. All right, this is my favorite Bible passage to pull out. I feel like maybe I should make a t-shirt that just says Numbers 31:17-18. That way people will be like, oh, what does that say? Well, it says, now kill all the boys, kill every woman that has slept with a man, but save for yourselves every girl who has never slept with a man. She is your booty. That's not what it says, but they're spoils of war. They're the Israelites' spoils here. This is basically a call to, one, murder everybody in a people group, so genocide, including women and children, right? But children, boys, but also you don't have to kill all the girls, because the girls that have not slept with a man, you can take for your own spoils, meaning you can force them into sexual slavery. Now, what do we mean by sexual slavery? Because I know a lot of people, a lot of Christians might just, their mind might be blown right now, be like, that's not sexual slavery. What are you talking about? Sexual slavery is a particular form of enslavement, which includes limitations of one's autonomy, freedom of movement, and power to decide matters relating to one's sexual activity. Thus, the crime also includes forced marriages, domestic servitude, or other forced labor that ultimately involves forced sexual activity. Basically, the biblical author is allowing the killing of the families of these young virgins, who are then taken for what can be described as sexual slavery, as consent cannot be presumed on the part of these girls. Hector Avalos, Slavery, Abolitionism, and the Ethics of Biblical Scholarship, page 78. Yes, this is definitely forcing these children into sexual slavery. This is sex trafficking in the Bible.
For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. What does that mean? There's no atheist. They were honest. They hold the truth. Before you got saved, you knew that there was a God and you knew that there was a creator.
So this guy just said that there are no atheists, right? no atheists out there, because we live in unrighteousness. Like, we know that God exists, but we choose to reject him, or we choose to not acknowledge his existence. But we know that he exists, so we can't be atheists. So I feel like what his refutation of atheism is, which that's how this was like marketed on their YouTube channel. But I feel like their refutation of atheism is that atheists don't exist, because everybody knows that Yahweh exists, because Yahweh has put it on their heart, and therefore they can't exist. Just denying our existence doesn't change the fact that I'm not convinced that your God exists. In this particular respect, with his particular definition of God, I'm definitely a hard or Gnostic atheist, giggity. I would actively put out there that as an active positive belief that Yahweh does not exist. And we can show this in multiple ways, which I'm not going to get into right now, but there's plenty of ways in which you can prove that Yahweh does not exist. You can't just sit there and wish me away, my existence away, or my position away, just because your Bible tells you so. You can't just wish us away, which is what I feel like he's trying to do.
In verse 19, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has showed it unto them. Who's the context of Scripture? Those who are in unrighteousness. That's not talking about saved, we're talking about the lost in these verses. God has manifested himself to them. So now, what about those tribes in whatever third world part of the country? God has manifested himself to them.
What he just argued here is that people in third world countries who have not been witnessed to already know that Yahweh exists, because Yahweh has showed himself to them. What? Like, if they don't know about Yahweh, then they're not going to know about Yahweh. You have to be taught and indoctrinated into this faith. Even small kids have to be taught this faith. They don't come out the womb screaming about Yahweh. Like, they don't come out of the womb thinking about God, knowing anything about God. Sure, maybe kids can pull something out of their ass about some kind of like figure they can't see that controls everything. But that's just because they're ignorant of how the world works. So in order to understand the world, they just make shit up. And I mean, I'm not here to shit on little kids for not knowing stuff. I'm just saying that, like, you have to actively teach kids about the definition of your own God, because they're not going to know about it any other way. This is a classic example that I've heard, given in a slightly different context, slightly different content, I guess, maybe a little bit. But if you remove all of the religious material and you stop teaching about God altogether for a generation, and then come back a generation later and try to come up with, the same deity definitions, you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to have the same definitions for Yahweh. You probably won't even have Yahweh. It'll be a totally different God. If you stop teaching about God for a single generation and then picked right back up trying to recreate all of the world's religions, I sincerely doubt that you would have the exact same religions, because they are not representative of reality. Of course, this is completely opposite for science, because if you totally removed all of the science textbooks, stop teaching about science for a single or multiple generations even, and then you came back through and you tried to figure out how this world works, again, you would come up with the same shit. You would come up with the same law of gravity. You would come up with the same radioactive decay calculations. You would come up with all of the same shit, because that is representative of reality. Religion is not.
They know that there's a God. We inherently know that there's a God. It's written upon our hearts. I think that's in Jeremiah somewhere. Look at this, Romans 19, I'll read it again. Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has showed it unto them. Everyone wants... Oh, that's my own notes, sorry.
But no, I really don't understand what it means for it to be written on our hearts. Like, that just totally escapes me. What does that even fucking mean? Like, I get what he's trying to communicate, and that's that he's trying to communicate that God is just inherently known to people. But I feel like the problem is that God is just simply not inherently known. If God was inherently known, then we would be able to wipe all information about God out and start from a clean slate and come up with the exact same definitions for God. But the problem is that God, the concepts of God that we have are not representative of reality. So we would inherently come up with different ideas about God. I feel like the general idea of a supernatural being existing doesn't exactly help his idea that God is written on our hearts, because everybody's idea of what this God would be different. If God was written on our hearts or was inherently known to us, then I feel like we would all have the same concept of God. So the fact that there are different gods refutes this, but also the fact that these definitions of God are entirely dependent upon the cultures in which they were constructed. I feel like that's a pretty big blow to this whole inherently knowing about God kind of thing. Also, the whole idea of attributing unknown things to a supernatural being or something like that is not natural to everybody. So again, not written on our hearts. But I feel like if you're going to go the written on our hearts route, then that's more of a specific claim about God. So, I mean, we could go about this all day. Anyways.
Everybody knows there's a God. What an atheist does, they want to suppress that and deny that. God is the author of morality. God can do no wrong. If God chooses to give life, he can take it away. He is God. He is outside of all of it because he created all of it that we know of. He can do whatever he wants. He wants to bring somebody into this life, he can take them out.
That sounds like such an abusive parent thing to say. I brought you into this world and I can take you out. Like, there are laws against that, okay? Also, I think that it's very telling that I can sit here as just a person, read the Bible word for word, and recognize how immoral God is. So saying that we're just stealing from God, or that God is somehow the moral foundation of everything or something like that, or he's, the epitome of morality, the fact that I can find immoral things in his word that he has directly commanded, like the taking of sexual slaves, the killing of innocent children and women and men, all of that shit. The fact that I can recognize that that's all immoral, but God has commanded it, means that I am vastly more moral than his God, because I would never call for people to be taken as sexual slaves. I would never call for the death of a child in the context that the Bible kind of puts it in right there. I know that I would never do that, and that inherently makes me more moral than Yahweh. And if you're going to sit there and try to claim that Yahweh is the apex of morality, I feel like you need to raise your standards a little bit, because you got a fucking low bar there.
You say God wouldn't do anything bad. You know what? God caused persecution in the church to spread the gospel. Right. God allowed some bad things to happen. For good.
And I just don't understand that. God allowed bad things to happen for good. How does that make sense? Like, am I just crazy over here and I don't understand it? No? Okay. Casey has always been my sanity check. Like, she'll call me out on my bullshit quick. Okay. Like, if I'm off on something or wrong about something, she'll be the first one to pipe up and be like, hey, you're wrong, bitch. Like about Die Hard. The whole idea that you can gaslight somebody into thinking that, like, doing something against their best interest is actually good for them. That sounds like Republicans, to be honest. Like, Republicans have a fantastic way of convincing people to keep voting for them, even though they consistently do things against their constituents' best interest. That's amazing to me. But I feel maybe it has roots, like, in this whole system right here of, like, sitting there and being like, oh, well, God did allow bad shit to happen, but he did it for good reasons. And it's like, and I can see that easily transferring to the whole political, arena, in that, oh, well, yeah, sure, this is bad, but, I'm doing it for a good reason, kind of thing. I think to gaslight somebody into that kind of position, like, I don't think that he necessarily understands that he's gaslighting people, or that he thinks that it's wrong to do this, but I feel like he's been gaslighted, and now he's been trained to gaslight other people into this whole idea that if I walk into a room and I slap you across the face and I continue to beat you and put you into a coma and you wake up 6 months later, that's somehow a good thing. Like, I did that for a good reason. putting you into a coma for 6 months. Like, there's a good reason for that. Like, I don't know. It seems like gaslighting somebody to think that violence or doing something against their best interest, I feel like that's just wrong and bad. Of course, I guess that's me stealing from Christianity, right? Even though it's antithetical to Christianity.
That's a fact that we really need to understand. And if we really get a hold of that, all of a sudden it's hard to have some bad days, and it's really hard to be depressed knowing that nothing can touch me unless it passes through his hand first.
Right.
Amen. You can tell the atheist that if the God of the Bible is real, then we don't really die, we just change location.
What? We don't really die. We just change location. So, you know, if God kills you, I guess he's just calling you home. I feel like that entire logic right there just seems to want to rationalize away, you know, death as not a big deal. But I feel like death is a pretty big deal. Like, I mean, we don't know what happens after we die. So framing it as, oh, it's just changing location. You don't know that. You don't know it's just changing locations. I mean, could that be a possibility? I mean, I guess so. I mean, if you think about it, nearly anything's possible. But I mean, we don't know that. But and to sit there and push it to your congregation that is the case. Of course, he's doing it on faith. He totally believes that that's the situation. I feel like that's just indoctrinating people into this false sense of security about death, and it softens the blow of what it means to die. And because it softens this blow about what it means to die, then I feel like I know, at least I can speak for myself. I know I would value life less if that were the case. Cause like when I'm playing Call of Duty and I die, like I die, you know, I respawn, I come back. It's just a change of location. So I value my life less in Call of Duty because it's just changing location. I mean, sure, I get sent to the gulag, but whatever. Hey heathens, I hope you liked today's director's cut, and I would really love it if you would go down below and let me know what you thought about this pastor's rant. Do you think that atheists are just suppressing the truth and unrighteousness? Or do you think that this pastor's a bit off his rocker? Let me know down below in the comments. And while you're down there, why don't you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.